Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's Future of Work Weekly Report. I am your host, Zach Wright, founder of Grapevine Software. We're building the future of work with our virtual office platform to help companies communicate important information across their teams, giving leaders a clear way to share those important updates while ensuring employees can easily access the information that they share when they need it most. Okay, now, if you are new here, the Future of Work Weekly Report is where we are discussing every Wednesday the hottest headlines and trending topics happening in the future of work. And that could be a range from remote, hybrid, flexibility, AI, productivity, you name it, we're going to be discussing that. And today we're going to be looking at a Bloomberg article talking about, and this is the article title, 3M ends remote-friendly policy by asking managers back in office 3 days. The title is a little bit misleading because they're saying remote-friendly policy. They called it something else, and we'll dive into that. But I just want to call that out because the title is a little bit misleading. I think it was a little bit clickbaity, but that's okay because it's got us talking about it, right? So let's dive into it like we always do, starting with highlight number one. So return to office from flexibility to structure. So the insight that we call out here is that 3M's new CEO, Bill Brown, is rolling back the company's 3-year remote-friendly policy. Managers will be expected to work in office 3 days a week, signaling a shift from the previous work your way, in quotations, model to a more structured in-office approach. Now, we are at Grapevine a little bit more into the flexibility design of hybrid work because not everything happens the way that it should in life. And if you are able to have a little bit more flexibility, then it's going to be better for your well-being. It's going to be better for the people around you. It's going to be better for the company actually as well, because you don't always do it. But if you need to, you can go do something, come back. Nothing is missing. You're still getting your work completed. But before I go into a full-on tangent, let's look at some of the other key callouts here in the stat section that we go over. So 3M will require managers and above. Technically, it's directors and above, but maybe that's a little typo on our end. So require managers and above to be on site Tuesday to Thursday. So they still get Monday and Friday in a remote setting if they choose to. So that's not terrible, right? It's not like Amazon's 5-day a week back in the office 100%, right? And so they say that it's starting with people within a 50-mile radius of the headquarters. But they do say that the new policy will expand globally depending on local labor laws. Now, I don't know, and maybe I should have looked this up before, if 3M is international. I'm assuming that they are. They have 85,000 employees, not just the executives or the corporate workers, but I think in total. So I think what they might be talking about for the labor laws is that the EU just passed a law, and I won't go into detail. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a full-on HR person. But the law basically says that the employees have the right to ask for flexibility. That's as far as I'll go into it, so I don't get any lawsuits coming at me. The last thing for this section is that 75% of non-manufacturing employees previously opted for hybrid or fully remote work. So the importance of calling out that 75% of non-manufacturing employees opting into either hybrid or fully remote is that they are clearly stating that this is what they want, not what's happening, but that they want hybrid and fully remote work. So my assumption is, like many companies who do RTOs, this isn't a full RTO. It's kind of like a structured half approach to an RTO. which makes it a little bit more nuanced in a sense. But I'm assuming that there will be attrition like we've seen with all the other RTOs. And the thing to call out here, as we do almost every single episode, I feel like, is that whenever we force people back into the office, it's not that that's a terrible thing. It's that there are consequences that happen to certain demographics that make it more impactful in a negative light. For example, when you force people back into the office, the people who are typically being affected most or choose to leave are women as being affected the most, and then which women can be in the second category, obviously. But the top performers also choose to go somewhere else. So it's not just that you're going to increase attrition, it's that you're going to lose top performers, and in many cases the women in the organization are also going to have to be impacted more negatively, making them decide to voluntarily leave because, again, we say this a lot in our episodes, they are still seen as the caregivers. So if they are working remotely, then they don't necessarily have to pay for childcare. They can take the child on themselves. And that's generalization because that's where the majority of it happens. It's not the only type, right? There's men out there who take care of the children in this capacity. And what I mean whenever we say care, child care, we're talking about while working, right? Or the person typically who has to sacrifice their career in many cases is the woman. So these are the things that we have to think about whenever we think about forcing people back into the office, right? And that's why we're a big believer, before we go to highlight number 2, that's why we at Grapevine and myself specifically, we're a big believer in remote and flexible work because it allows a lot of people who weren't necessarily taken care of or thought of. Unfortunately that they weren't thought of. Fortunately, remote and hybrid work gives them the voice that they never had. It gives them the opportunities that they didn't have or they thought that they couldn't have, right? And so and even on the other side, right? We look at like a show like Mad Men, for example. If you look at Don Draper, if you're not familiar with this, he's an advertising executive. He's always traveling. He's also cheating, so that's not a good thing. But the point is that he barely got to see his kids in the show, right? And so if you look at somebody like myself, when our family gets together, I will have more time with the child because I'm working from home. And even if I'm working late night, I can pause it, do what I need to, and come back if I need to, right? So there's a lot of these things that we have to think about. All right, let's go to highlight number 2. CEO-led mandates driving culture shifts. So I think this was just more of a overall sentiment versus specifically talking about 3M, but we will talk about them here as well. So the return to office push reflects a broader trend among older companies. They're 122 years old, 3M is, where leadership, often citing innovation concerns, advocates for more office presence. However, studies show that top-down decisions may erode trust and increase employee turnover. I've talked about the job characteristics model that I learned about in my undergrad thesis paper several times, and it always surprises me that we as a society haven't made this shift yet. We're currently going through it, but it took a pandemic for us to even think about this. And I'm not talking about remote work. I'm talking about how we treat employees. Because before the pandemic, before remote work, before hybrid work, employers had this strong arm, this control, this power over employees. And what remote work or the conversation of future of work is actually doing is it's shifting the power. Not fully, because employees still have to listen to their direct managers. They still have to abide by the guidelines, the rules, the policies, the laws, so on and so forth. But what it is doing is it's giving the employees a voice where they have to be heard instead of a voice that can be ignored, right? And so this is why it's so important for us to continue down this road in changing how we work. Because I think that the umbrella term is remote work, hybrid work, flexible work, but the underlining theme is the shift in that power, worker versus employer. And with the future of work, we're challenging the structure of what was, what's trying to stay around, and what can be in the future, right? And so that's why it's so powerful to be a believer of the future of work. And I think the people who are resisting, and they kind of talk about this, they definitely say it in the article itself. They say the people who are typically pushing for RTOs and people to get back into the office are older white male leaders, right? And if we think about that, going back to Mad Men, that is what was typical. Now that's not the case. And so we have to start thinking about who else will this impact? How can we, and this is my issue with a lot of these things whenever people talk about return to office and we got to go back to the old way, or even like the only way, like if we started off here with the new CEO of 3M saying the reason that we want people back in the office is for innovation. Innovation doesn't happen in the office or remote or in a flexible world or working world. It happens when the culture is strong. It happens when the employees are connected. It happens when leaders are transparent and provide trust and allow risk. That's where innovation comes from. It doesn't come from a physical office or even being in a physical environment. Can it spark that if we're in the office? Yes, but so can impromptu meetings, whether they're virtual or not. And so that's what we're really getting at whenever we're talking about remote work or flexible work. It's shifting the way that we used to work to how we know we can work and how we should work in the future, because it's a win-win situation in the sense that the company wins because employees are more satisfied, they're more productive, they're more engaged because they feel like the company cares about them and they believe in the work that they do, and they're able to take risk without consequence unless it's a huge issue. Like if somebody does something immoral or against the law, those are different. That's not what we're talking about. But just the ability to believe that you have the ability to take a risk or suggest an idea that could be really taken into consideration, that inspires an employee. Again, we're talking about win-win-win situations. So the other win is, I can't remember if I started with the company or not, but the company benefits from the employee's productivity. The employee benefits because they have the flexibility, the autonomy, the trust of all these things. They win in life and they win in work. And then the customer wins because of the innovation, the improvements in the organization and the environment and what they put out there, whether it's services, whether it's products, whatever the case is. If the employee feels empowered and they're able to take risk and they're able to think outside the box and they're able to do all these things, that is the win. And so when we talk about innovation, you got to be careful. We got to tie it all together in what we know is true. Okay, so some of the things that we're going to call out before we go to highlight number 3 is research shows companies founded before 1980 are more likely to require office work. And that could just be for the way that we used to work. So maybe there's not as many robotics, maybe there's not as much automation, maybe there's certain things that they haven't been able to adapt to because of the industry that they chose to go in, so on and so forth. Because I'm assuming, I mean, you take Grapevine, for example, we're a technology company. And so we have the ability, and that's one of the arguments that we always hear is, well, you have the ability to work from home 100%. And yes, we do. We don't try to take that for granted or try to say that everybody can work remotely. But what we do say is that everybody can have some form of flexibility. And they even talk about that here, and we'll talk about that in highlight number 3. But let's look at the second one of the stats section. So 3M's new CEO aims to reignite innovation and address slow revenue growth by emphasizing in-office collaboration. We'll see. I mean, so far we haven't seen any studies or outcomes or use cases that say being in the office actually is more profitable, other than the WeWork article that we read last week. But other than that, we haven't seen that. Just being in the office doesn't automatically increase or enhance collaboration, and it doesn't automatically or enhance innovation, right? It's all about intention. It's all about the culture that you build. It's all about the things. And actually, okay, I'm going to say this, and then I gotta keep going because I'm going to make this long. This is the actual problem with the way that companies are using RTOs. They're putting it on productivity, they're putting it on profitability, they're putting it on innovation, they're putting it on culture. Some companies do this really well, where they can have all of those things, and it's maybe they're in office, maybe they're not. But it's not because they are in the office. It's because what they do when they're in the office, or how they operate, how they work. They care about all these things, and they make them a focus, and they don't belittle their employees in the process. They give them the benefits, they give them the perks, they have great relationships with their managers. The company is transparent, so everybody knows what they need to do. And culture matters. It's intentional. It's not just something that happens. That is what creates productivity, profitability, engagement, and higher retention, not being in an office. So if they were having lower profits, being in the office with no changes won't change that outcome, right? So that's something that we have to think about whenever people are talking about, oh, yes, we're going to come into the office and we're going to be more profitable, we're going to be more productive, we're going to be more engaged, we're going to build culture and all that kind of stuff. Why can't you do it? If you couldn't do it remotely, why do you have to do it in the office, right? It's the shift in how you work. Okay. And then they just call out this last one, and then we'll move to highlight number 3. Companies like Amazon and Dell are making similar RTO moves, citing innovation challenges with remote work. Again, there's no evidence to say that in-office work produces a higher outcome or higher levels of engagement. In fact, we had tons of, I can't remember the percentage, but I think it was in the 30s, that we had actively disengaged people whenever they were in the office. This was before the pandemic. So we weren't doing it in the office. What makes us think that we're going to do it now? So that's why I get a little bit upset whenever people are just bringing people back into the office for no real reason, and they put it on innovation and productivity. It's not. Anyway. All right, highlight number 3, and then we'll wrap this up. Hopefully this makes sense. I feel like I've gone on some tangents and maybe it doesn't make sense, but hey, we're recording it on Wednesday and we're trying to get it out on Wednesday, so bear with us. All right, highlight number 3, the flexibility divide, production versus corporate roles. So while corporate roles at 3M had the flexibility to negotiate remote work, production workers were left with limited options. This disparity highlights the growing divide in how different types of workforces experience flexibility. And so this is kind of what I was going into earlier, where yes, manufacturer workers, it is harder to have remote work because you have to be there physically to do the job. One of the things that they call out that 3M does, and I think that they'll continue to do, is shifting your schedules. So let's say that I work Monday through Thursday in the factory, but I have my son has a soccer game on Tuesday, and I want to be able to make sure that I make it because it's at 3 for some weird reason. And so I tell Bob over here, hey, do you want to work my Tuesday and I'll work your Friday, right? And so that's what it is. So it's like just shifting your schedule, but still being able to have that flexibility. And so like each industry, whenever it comes to that, when people have to be in the office, it's going to be a little bit different. But there still are flexibility options that we can put into place, right? And I remember a study, I can't remember where it was from, but it was a study of remote workers, white collar knowledge workers, and blue collar workers. And they asked the blue collar workers, were you offended? Are you disappointed? Are you angry at your colleagues who can work remotely? And they said, no, if I could, I would too. And we've talked about this where like if a blue collar worker has ambitions to become a white collar worker or a knowledge worker, the company like 3M could actually leverage that as growing within a strategy for to attract employees that maybe don't have the skills that they want to have, but they want to grow into it. So they start at the manufacturing level, and then 3M offers them certifications or courses or trainings and growth plans that allow them to work up the ladder to get into a knowledge worker position, right? Not everybody wants to do that. Some blue collar workers love working. I have a friend who does drilling. I think it's well drilling, and he loves it. He loves it. He doesn't want to be a knowledge worker, and that's perfectly fine, right? But it's the choice, right? And so it's the choice, and it's also a strategy for attracting employees into your organization to help them grow within. Just think about that. That's an awesome story. It's like the guy who created Flaming Hot Cheetos, right? If you haven't watched that movie, check it out. I watched it on Hulu. It might still be there. All right. And then let's see. Okay, so workers on the production line had fewer options, relying on shift swaps for flexibility. And then randomly at the end, they call out that L3Harris, Brown's previous company, recently mandated full-time office work for all employees in the US. So this guy, and that was a month ago. So this guy that's coming into 3M was the CEO of L3Harris, told the workers to come back into the office, and then he pieced out. So very loyal guy, I guess. I don't know. But maybe what they're trying to insinuate is that there's a trend with Brown's approach. So he might be starting with 3 days. It could extend to 4 and then 5, right? So maybe that's kind of what they're getting at here. And so, I mean, really, that's highlight number 3. We don't have to go too much into that. But if we look at the overall call outs, so Top-down RTO mandates risk driving away talent and eroding trust. Innovation flourishes where employees feel empowered, not where they work, but where they feel empowered. It's a big difference. The walls that you go into doesn't make you inspired just because you walk into an office with other people, right? The second one is flexible work policies don't just attract top talent, they help retain them. We talked about that. And building cultures requires more than attendance, it requires trust. And then the last call out that we discussed is production versus corporate flexibility gaps reflect on growing divide. Organizations must align policies across all roles to foster fairness and engagement. And that is a struggle. That is going to be a struggle, but it's where you can make it a strategy. If the people working the manufacturing line have an issue with what they're doing, they can put their hat in the ring. And I don't know if they can at 3M, but I'm just thinking with 85,000 employees, you probably have areas that you can fill in the gaps. And I'm not talking about just creating middle managers, but I'm actually talking about creating seeing potential in someone who is on the manufacturing line and floor, and noticing, because it's not going to work for everybody, but noticing that they have some type of talent, whether it's smarts, whether it's a skill that they picked up, whether it's like, for example, my brother-in-law, now he was in the military and he had managerial experience, but now he's trying to get into the civilian world of work. And what happens here is that military experience doesn't necessarily translate, unfortunately. And he worked on the line at a company, and now he's going to be a project manager because he took it to the CEO. It's a smaller organization, but he took it to the CEO and said, hey, there's different ways around this that I think that we can improve. He's already saved them several thousands of dollars just by doing XYZ. And so this is what I'm talking about, right? It's almost like we can look at this as a positive and incorporate ways to attract employees, or we can do the exact opposite, where some of these larger companies are choosing to go to RTO and blame everything on remote work instead of actually changing and adapting the way that we work to improve the lives of employees, not just lives, because I think sometimes whenever we say lives, people think that, oh, you're being soft or there's this and that. But no, we have to look at what actually comes through and becomes beneficial to get that win-win-win that we talked about earlier, right? And so the companies who see that there is a win-win-win situation whenever it comes to flexible work, and whenever it comes to remote work, there's a win-win-win. And even if you wanted to be in office, the thing that you have to do to create that win-win-win is to focus on the things that matter and shift how we treat employees, and don't look at it like a dictatorship or an autocrat. I don't know if that's the right word, authoritarian approach. It's never been my way or the highway is the way to make people want to stay in an organization, make them want to do more, and make them want to go above and beyond. It's never been that way. So we have to stop pretending, and we have to stop scapegoating remote work being the issue. That's not the issue. The issue is how we choose to work, how we choose to manage our employees, and how we choose to hear them. And so I'm going to stop because I don't even know if this made sense, but I hope it did. And I appreciate everyone taking the time to watch these videos. I hope that they're insightful. I hope that they're helpful. And I hope that most of all, they get you to think, right? Because there's no one right way to go about it. But if we are thinking as we try to develop the future of work, then it tells us that we're moving forward instead of just going back to what we knew. So thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with other Future of Work pioneers out there. And we will see you on the next Future of Work Weekly Report.